What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline, and we are back on Jason Jorjani. He's become one of my favorite people to listen to. This guy is a wealth of knowledge, doesn't even begin to describe him. It seems that he is educated in every facet of what's happening, whether it's political, whether it's historical, whether it's spiritual on this planet, all the comings and goings. I think he considers himself, I've heard in an interview say he's a philosopher, or he considers himself to be a philosopher. And I would concur, because I think that's the best way to describe him. And he just covers all of these amazing topics with such clarity, and it seems to have so many good sources. So I've been really impressed by him. If you guys agree, let me know in the comments. If you guys disagree, let me know in the comments as well, because I'm still trying to keep an open mind about everybody that I'm learning about. I feel like I've been thrown in with to so much information in the last few months. So please let me know. But so far, somebody recommended Jason Jorjani in the comments, and I feel like I've been listening to just a barrage of content from him over the last few weeks. Well, this is a podcast from the Danny Jones podcast where Jason Jorjani is interviewed, and it's almost a 4-hour podcast. I listened to it in its entirety, and it goes over all sorts of different topics, including the political landscape right now, Atlantis, and that entire dynamic, what was really going on there. He talks in great detail about Epstein. He actually gives a crazy, wild theory, which actually makes a ton of sense about what actually happened to Epstein and what he was getting into and where he was really trying to go, what circles he was trying to climb into, and what actually caused his downfall ultimately. And it makes a lot of sense. But I'm not going to get into all that, because what this video is going to focus on is a little part of this podcast that I caught right at the end, which really comes back to the main focal point of this podcast, which is what happens when we die. And I love that Danny Jones asked Jason Jorjani point blank, hey, what do you think happens when we die? And then he starts to describe his answer, including this purported prison or control system that we seem to be trapped in, this recycling of reincarnation, the reincarnation trap, as it were, as some people are calling it. He talks about this entire system, and I've been waiting for somebody to put it in this really nice framework. And the last thing I'll say before we get into the clips is he's actually just written a book that's focused entirely on this subject. And I found out listening to this podcast, I ordered it, so it's coming. I got more books to read, still in the middle of a book right now, but I cannot wait, because I believe the way he's described it, it answers so many of these questions that I'm still having. Some of them are getting answered, but as I answer some, I feel like more are popping up, even more are popping up. So I can't wait for this book. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the mix. I'm going to let Jason Jorjani speak to you. Now, this is the first thing that I hadn't heard before, and I've read a couple books about near-death experiences that try to go into the life between lives, via Michael Newton. I never heard this before, but I thought this was an interesting tidbit. He notes that most people are in the Bardo state, or the transition state in between lives, essentially in the astral plane, for no more than 1 to 5 years of time on Earth, which I actually thought time didn't really exist in the astral plane, but maybe it does. And he's obviously not just pulling this out of thin air. He's citing a couple sources that I haven't checked myself yet, but I found this very interesting. And this adds to the theory that a lot of times the people that we see, passed on relatives that we may see in these life reviews, or as we're getting pulled up into the astral, the purported astral, this lends credibility to the fact that these actually may in fact be manipulations, and they're not truly our deceased loved ones that we're seeing. But check this out.
For rebirth.
What do you think happens when we die?
Usually people go out of their bodies, so they see their corpse, and then they start to get pulled in by this white light that they see somewhere around them. Okay. And they describe this as having like a magnetic power. So it's very hard to get away from this thing. Like you try to, after you die, let's say you want to see your funeral. So you go to your funeral, you see your funeral, you see people crying over your grave. Or maybe you don't care so much about your funeral because you had very few friends, hardly anybody's going to show up there. And really you're worried about your aunt, who was the closest person to you in your life. And next thing you know, you're in her apartment watching her bawl her eyes out over you. So you go to various places that your consciousness is directed without even thinking, subconsciously, right? Like
and you can see
an out-of-body experience,
Yeah.
astral projection.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's, for most people, largely driven by the subconscious. You don't have a lot of control over it. It's driven by your deep fears and concerns. But then this white light keeps showing up and trying to pull you into it. And if you go into the white light, the next thing that you see is basically dead relatives. And here's one of the most fucked up things is that there are cases where, let's say, someone in their 80s has a near-death experience.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, I went into the light and Nana was there. And Nana is like the grandmother who died when this person was in her 20s. So in her 20s, she grew up with this grandmother. The grandmother died when she was in her 20s. Now she's in her 80s having a near-death experience. And she says, when I went into the light, there was Nana ready to greet me. Well, that's a manipulation because decades of careful study of reincarnation by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, Dr. Helen Wambach, all show that the transition between death and rebirth is on average, 1 to 5 years. It's hardly ever that anyone is in what the Tibetans call the Bardo state for more than 5 years.
1 to 5 years transition period.
Yeah, that's the standard in most cases.
That's very interesting. And I have listened to a ton of near-death experience accounts. I've also read multiple books on near-death experiences as well. And I used to, prior to this whole world was opened up to me in the last few months, I used to be, I guess you would consider me one of these new age spiritual people that put full faith in a lot of these near-death experiences and what they brought to the table in terms of what the whole story was, that life is all about learning. It's all about growth. We're here on our own journey. We have to have so many reincarnations as we continue to elevate our soul and raise our vibration. It's all love. It's all for our benefit. Oh, even the pain, you know what I mean? I was fully in that zone. And now my world has kind of been flipped upside down. I'm still trying to get my footing, but this is a very interesting point because I definitely have heard this in multiple near-death experiences where people that have long since been deceased are there, are waiting, are talking to the individuals. And so this sheds some new light that's quite interesting. I haven't read this myself, this 1 to 5 year number, but for now, until I check these resources, I will trust Jason Jorjani, as from everything I've heard of him thus far, seems to be extremely credible, and he definitely does his due diligence. And he did note some citations. I bet you if I do check those out, those will in fact ring true. Okay. The next little clip here is he talks about more manipulations in the Matrix. So there he talks about some, right? The projection of deceased loved ones. There's many other potential manipulations that occur, some of which I've actually heard about as well in near-death experiences. So I'm going to have Jason Jorjani take it away, and then I'll chime in after this clip.
Lacra, and there are some really creepy cases that I got from out of Carl Turner's research where people would see, and also PMH Atwater did good research on this. People would see like what appeared to be a dead relative, what seemed to talk like Nana, and then all of a sudden, like she glitched, and it's some monstrous creature.
What?
Yeah. There are cases like that where the person realizes something glitches and they realize the deception. And so you see dead relatives. The other thing you see are religious authority figures. So Christians will see Jesus. Hindus will see, I don't know, Krishna.
And it's funny too, because when I used to hear this, there was actually a great guest on Next Level Soul podcast that said, he researched over 2,000 near-death experiences, and he saw a wide array of these religious figures. And the way it's generally been explained in the New Age spirituality from that vantage point is that, well, you're being shown somebody. It's not that any of these religious figures necessarily are the true religious figure of the world or whatnot, but you're seeing somebody that you're familiar with to make you feel comfortable during the transition. So it's really for your benefit, and then you're brought in. And I actually bought that for a long time. Perhaps could buy it again. I'm not totally saying that idea makes no sense anymore, but the idea now that it's being presented as, hey, it's in fact a manipulation. It's meant to get it in your good graces, and you are always seeing the one you expect. That actually makes more sense to me, because why would you be confronted with a lie, even if it's going to confront you? Even if it's going to comfort you at that point, I would imagine in your true spiritual essence, you just want to know the truth. All right, you know what I mean? And you're brought into this space. Why wouldn't you just be shown, hey, this is what it was all about, as opposed to some weird manipulation just because that's what you believed during your life? So what if it was wrong? Very, 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 very interesting. But yeah, I've heard the religious figure thing so many times in these different NDEs.
Okay. So they produce simulacra of religious authority figures to get you to go along with the plan. And the plan is the next stage, if you get that far, say you're having a near-death experience and they haven't resuscitated you yet, and you get as far as this, the next stage is that you're given a life review. The angels play your life back for you like a holographic recording. And you're made to feel guilt and shame and joy and anguish and go through this whole emotional roller coaster about the shit you've done in your life. And then they use that to try to convince you that morally and for the sake of your spiritual betterment, the best conditions for you to be born under in your next life are X, Y, and Z, which a Hindu might call that karma. But a Christian would say, like, to the extent that a Christian can even integrate reincarnation, which some of the old Christians did before it became anathema, like in the writings of Oregon Church Father, you have references to reincarnation. A Christian might say, well, you know, God is like putting you under conditions in your next life that are going to make you more worthy of salvation eventually at the final judgment or some such bullshit.
He's so funny the way he dismisses that stuff. We're going to talk more about karma and why Jason Jorjani believes karma is a load of BS in his own words. But yeah, I've heard that life review. And in fact, when I first became aware of the life review, it actually seemed very intriguing to me. It actually, I thought it made a lot of sense. Okay, so everything is being monitored. Everything is being recorded as we're doing it. And then we're shown the error of our ways. We're shown the good stuff of our ways, hence the learning process. Like that all added up. But then now some of my concerns with this entire system is, again, why is the memory wipe happening? Why do you have to have no memory of your previous life? The more I think about it, the less sense that makes. Now, again, there could be some reason that I'm not able to comprehend perhaps with this brain in this physical realm. So we have to be open to that possibility, I suppose. But it does seem to make more sense that the brain wipe and the memory erasure is more of a manipulation than some sort of growth mechanism. So it is what it is. But now we get back to this idea. Oh, we're going to get back to the idea of karma in a subsequent clip. But this next part is pretty chilling. And this is the part that I didn't want to accept when I first stumbled upon this paradigm. Basically, David Icke was the one that first got me thinking about this idea that, yes, everything is a manipulation. We're in some sort of reincarnation loop, cycle, trap, if you will, not for our own benefit, but for some external benefit. And this was the first really scary thing that I thought of, was like, oh my God, because I thought all the madness of the world, whatever we are subjected to in this life, all the different stresses and whatnot that can seem problematic. And don't get me wrong, I love life. I actually really enjoy life, but certainly it's not that way for everybody on this planet, and life can be absolutely overwhelming depending on where you are on the planet. But I always felt, especially with this discovery of the New Age spirituality movement, that we all reached where we're supposed to go when we died. And learning about this is like, wait a minute, that may not be the case. And death is no escape. In fact, we're just fed right back into the system to repeat it all over again. And this is exactly what Jason Jorjani says right here.
It's extremely disturbing. I mean, you know, what it says is that the close encounter phenomenon, when you pay close attention to the details, doesn't just reveal an earthly, like nuts and bolts, physical, let's say, socio-political control system that we're inside of, that you might escape through death. After all, this is what makes suicide so compelling to a lot of anguished people, is the idea that we can get out of this fucking hellhole finally. There's a way out. And maybe if there's a beneficent God and there's a beneficent celestial hierarchy, like if you're not a fundamentalist, God will forgive you because God understood how bad your life was. And like, you'll finally be free from this hellish realm that we live in. After all, the Gnostics thought that way, right? They believed we were in this fallen world, and, you know, that there's a transcendental realm beyond this realm, and that the aeons are going to welcome you once you could free yourself from the realm governed by the archons and so forth, right? Sorry, it ain't that way. The control system is psychotronic. It encompasses what we call the spirit.
So there it is. And that which begs the question, is there a way out? Is there a way to escape? Now, this is exactly what Jason Jorjani's book is about, and some other books like Leaving the Trap are about. And again, there's a lot more information that I plan to read and learn about different people theorizing different ways of eventually exiting the reincarnation loop. But yeah, that's why I cannot wait to get this book from Jason Jorjani. Now, this is a very interesting clip as well, because now he talks about, I guess, the group that I was kind of falling into for, I don't know, year, 2 years, something like that. The new agey people, as he calls us, or I guess you'd say would call people that I used to more or less associate with, at least from an ideological standpoint. But this is quite funny, his take on new age people, because it's totally how I used to feel. It really is.
Now, you see, new agey people, the hippy dippy flaky new agey types, hate this, because there's a general tendency among new age types to want to believe that our spiritual development is in our own hands on an individual level. And that, like, if you just elevate your consciousness, you're going to eventually be reborn under optimal conditions. And then eventually you won't be reborn at all. You're just, go up into the perfect, idyllic, utopian, transcendental realm. This is a general thrust of new age thinking. And then it's all up to you. And you shouldn't project negative intentions, because they'll just come back to you and you'll wind up with bad karma. By the way, it's another subject I go into, is karma. And I show in detailed case studies of reincarnation that karma is total bullshit. People, even children, get maimed in violent attacks, and they get reborn with birth defects and deformations. Because what happens is, people who were absolutely innocent, didn't do anything, they're mutilated by a violent criminal. The poor person gets born with a birth defect. Because what happens is, if you deeply internalize a physical trauma at the moment that you're dying, like somebody cuts your arm off or something, if you so deeply internalize that during that traumatic event, it will reshape the morphic field of your astral body. And that morphic field of your astral body can impact fetal development in your reincarnated body. So, and this to understand this, you have to go into the morphic resonance research that Rupert Sheldrake has done. Yeah. And you have to also look at the extension of it that Dr. Ian Stevenson.
I've heard a little bit about the morphic field. I don't know a ton about it. I don't know very much about it at all, to be honest, but I know that there's some correspondence between the morphic body, the astral body, and your actual physical form. But I don't know anything else beyond that. But that's wild that he's saying that if you can have a certain level of trauma to the morphic body, then in the next life, in the reincarnated life, you're going to have some physical remnants of that damage that you had in the previous life. That's crazy. I haven't looked into that research, but as I mentioned previously, if Jason Jorjani says it, I'm usually erring on the side that he's done his research and he knows exactly what he's talking about. So now he goes, and you heard him kind of go off about karma. Now he's going to go off about karma one more time and just smash karma to bits, which is, again, interesting, because that's something I'm not saying, again, I've totally dismissed it, but this is something that I was really buying into at one point. It made sense. It seemed to show that there was some balance in the grand scheme of existence for positive things that you do and negative things that you do. And in fact, that's what I wanted to believe, that there is a balance and that there is some level of justice, not eternal justice like a hellish realm, which doesn't seem to be justice at all, in fact, but some sort of balancing out of positive and negative energies. That made a lot of sense. I think I wanted to believe it, but he absolutely does not believe it, at least in a particular capacity. And I'll explain what I mean in a second.
So point being, that, I show, among other things, in Gnosis, that karma is a load of crap. There's no moral order in death and rebirth. And the entities that try to con you into believing there is are actually just trying to keep you within the control system. There's no correlation between how moral a life somebody lived and what conditions they wind up being reborn.
And I can see that, and he probably has done way more research on that than I have, so I can't really dispute what he's saying. However, the only way I would push back is it is possible, it is foreseeable that karma is not necessarily always manifesting in particular life conditions from one life to the next. And also, how are we to measure somebody's exact karmic load or karmic debt from one life to the next? It may seem a particular way, but we may not know the ins and outs and the intricacies of exactly everything that they've done, or maybe even in prior lives. I don't really know how you could assess that, but he seems to believe that overall, let's say even if you look away from the case studies, that the idea of karma, which I can buy into, if he's saying all these other things are manipulations, that the idea of karma is just another manipulation mechanism to keep us reincarnating and to keep us coming back. But there it is in a nutshell. Oh, I think we got one more clip here. Now, this final one is about his book, and he explains in a nutshell what his new book is all about. By the way, when I watched an interview of him about a 9-month-old interview, he mentioned that he was working on this book. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait till he finishes it. I don't think he even had a working title for it yet, but I was very excited. Maybe he had mentioned it, but I hadn't looked it up. Then I saw this one, which aired about 3 months ago, and then he says it's done. So I looked it up and I immediately bought it. So I'm very excited. But here in Jason Jorjani's own words is a quick description of what the Gnosis is all about. By the way, Gnosis coming from the term Gnosis beginning with a G in Gnosticism.
So this is all in Gnosis, your new book.
Yeah, I mean, so
Cool.
it's a comprehensive study of death, the afterlife, and rebirth that basically reconstructs what I think was the perspective of the Belial group in Atlantis. The rebels of Atlantis, you could say the Promethean faction in Atlantis that rose up against the Olympian control system.
There it is. And I believe in there, I don't think he said it right there, but I think in other clips somewhere else he's talked about this. I think he's trying to basically help people understand the system and navigate the system. So it's just incredible that he's put this time in and done this work. And I can only imagine the book, how good the book is going to be, considering how awesome his interviews typically are and just how full of knowledge he is. So there it is. Very, very fascinating stuff. Jason Jorjani right there, put on the spot on exactly what happens when we die. Fascinating stuff. Definitely got me thinking and got me wanting to learn more. Once again, I ask all of you guys, if you have more resources, more recommendations for things that I should look into, please let me know in the comments. You guys are driving this channel right now, and you are driving this entire journey that I'm on, that we are all on collectively. And it's thank you everybody. That's all I got for you guys today. I got to go to bed. I've had a crazy weekend, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.